There's a grave in the northeast corner of Coldwater Hollow Cemetery. No flowers, no visitors, just a flat stone eaten away by moss and time. The name carved into it reads Elijah Price. Died October 17, 2017. But if you ask anyone who's lived here long enough, they'll tell you that's not the day he died. It's the day he started walking. What would you do if you woke up underground? If you opened your eyes in total blackness, with splinters pressing into your back and dirt falling into your mouth with every breath? No memory, no air, just panic, and wood above you that starts to crack as your fists smash into it again and again and again. Would you try to scream, knowing no one would hear? Or would you let your silence become part of the earth? This story isn't about resurrection. It's not about angels or demons. It's about something we buried and what happened when it didn't stay buried. And the man who walked out wasn't the same as the man who went in. His name was Elijah Price. The town knew him as the gravekeeper. Quiet, solitary, lived alone at the edge of the cemetery in a one-room shack. Kept to himself, always kind, always watching. They said he talked to the graves, left candles on certain headstones no one visited anymore, marked some in chalk, avoided others completely. And every morning, without fail, before the sun even touched the ground, he walked the same path, row to row, grave to grave, like he was checking on something or someone. The townspeople assumed he was just a lonely man, a little strange, a little broken, but harmless, until he vanished. October 17th, cold morning. No footprints in the frost leading out of the cemetery. Just one open grave, a broken casket lid, and the caretaker's key ring, still warm, lying in the dirt. The police report said he was likely the victim of foul play. Maybe a robbery, maybe worse. A service was held, his casket lowered, family flew in. Dirt was packed down, and that should have been the end of it. 3 nights later, a woman walking her dog near the cemetery gate saw someone moving between the stones. She described a man with a limp, covered in soil, walking barefoot with his head tilted sideways, like he was listening to something underground. When she called out, he didn't turn. He just kept walking until he disappeared into the trees behind the northern wall. Security footage from the caretaker's shed shows the same figure returning at dawn, opening the door, sitting at the desk. But here's the thing. Elijah was already buried by then. Identified, buried, laid to rest by hands that loved him. So who, or what walked back and wearing his face? Some believe he was buried alive, that he dug his way out, that he survived. Others say it wasn't Elijah at all, but something else. Something that had been waiting underneath the cemetery long before we laid down stone. Whatever the truth is, one fact remains. Elijah Price was seen walking after the day he died, and no one has been able to explain how. So I'll ask you again. If you woke up buried with no memory of how you died, would you claw your way out, knowing you weren't supposed to come back? Because the man in this story didn't crawl free to be saved. He came back because something older than him, something deeper, pushed him upward. And it wasn't finished yet. Watch carefully. By the end of this story, you'll understand why they never opened that grave again.
Before they buried him, Elijah Price had one job. He watched the dead. And for 27 years, they say he did it better than anyone else ever had. He was always the first to arrive, the last to leave. He knew every name carved into every stone, even the ones no one else remembered. In a town where memory fades fast, Elijah remembered for everyone. He walked the rows like he was reading scripture, his boots brushing the leaves aside like ritual. He greeted each stone with a whisper, as if someone was still listening. Some thought it was just habit. Others believed he could feel what was under the soil. He lived in a shack at the edge of the grounds. One window, one door. Inside, everything smelled of rain, old paper, and candle wax. There were no photos on the wall, no trophies, just a desk, a kerosene lamp, and a photograph tucked into the frame of a cracked mirror. The photo was yellowed with age, a woman holding a boy, the boy's face scratched out in pen. Some said it was his mother, others weren't sure. Elijah never spoke about it. He never spoke much at all, but every night before he slept, he lit a candle beneath it, and stared until the wax melted flat. The townspeople liked him, in the way people like someone who never asks for anything. He'd fix the church gate without being told, feed the cats no one claimed, patch the roof above the veterans' plot before the storm came. He was a part of Coldwater Hollow, and yet not quite in it. He wasn't on social media, had no family listed, no next of kin, no known bank accounts, no medical records after 1989. But he had a nameplate on the cemetery office door, Elijah Price, caretaker since 1994, and around his neck always, even when he slept, hung a rusted iron key. No one knew what it opened, not even the groundskeeper who worked with him. But when asked, Elijah would only say, "Some doors stay shut for a reason." He said it without fear, without humor, like he was repeating something taught to him long ago. He followed the same routine for 27 years. Rain or snow, never missed a day, until October 17th, the morning they found the grave dug open, and the caretaker gone. What followed changed the town forever. But if you ask me, the change didn't start that day. It started the day Elijah Price was hired. Because even back then, even in his first photograph on record, he looked like someone who had already seen the end of the world. 3 nights after Elijah disappeared, the ground began to change. It started with a scream, not from the church, not from the woods, from underground. The grave had no name, no headstone, just a mound of earth near the tree line. One Elijah passed every day. At first he thought it was wind, animals maybe, a trick of memory. But the scream came again, louder, like it had traveled a very long way, through very thick soil. A scream with no throat. He took his lantern, walked out. Rain was just starting, cold, gentle, enough to smear the chalk symbols he'd marked on certain stones. He reached the grave, paused, listening, nothing. He waited, 10 minutes, nothing, went back inside. But when he woke the next morning, the dirt on that grave had changed. It looked disturbed, not dug up, not caved in, just shifted, like something underneath had turned over in its sleep. On the second night, the scream came again, longer, sharper. This time, it was closer. When Elijah stepped outside, the fog was thick, thicker than he'd ever seen it. Shapes moved in the mist, nothing he could name, nothing with legs. He found his spade lying beside the open crypt. He hadn't touched it in days, but the blade was wet, covered in dirt he hadn't moved. His tool chest was open, neatly arranged, but the hammer was missing. He checked the cameras in the shed. The timestamp said 3:17 a.m. Frame by frame, the hammer lifted on its own, floated, dropped. On the third night, it got worse. The scream didn't come, but the air, it felt hollow, like everything around him had gone still just before impact. He walked out into the rain, flashlight shaking in his hand, and then he saw it, a new stone, freshly placed, still glistening wet from the storm, carved by hands that never left footprints, with a name he recognized. Elijah Price, born 1962, died October 17, 2017. He backed away, eyes wide, mud soaking his shoes. Then, the coffin lid beneath the soil shifted, just once, a gentle creak, wood under pressure, a push from the inside. He dropped his flashlight. The beam landed sideways, lit the base of the headstone, and there was his own face, not carved, reflected, like a mirror frozen in the stone, staring back at him with no mouth. Elijah didn't scream. He didn't run. He knelt, pressed his hand against the cold granite, whispered something no one's ever been able to repeat, and just like that, the wind died. The reflection disappeared. The ground was still. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't call the town. He didn't pray. He went back to his shack, closed the door, sat at the desk, and began writing in a journal no one knew existed, page after page of names that don't appear in any cemetery record, all under the same header, still awake. 3 days after seeing the tombstone with his face, Elijah went back. No sleep, no food, just one shovel, and a question that wouldn't leave him alone. He waited until 3 a.m. The graveyard was silent. No birds, no wind, just fog, sitting low, like it was listening. He stood at the base of his own grave and started digging. Each scoop brought up something colder. The earth wasn't warm. It wasn't dead. It was waiting. And as he dug, the temperature dropped. By the time he hit the wood, his fingertips were blue. He touched the lid, and for a moment, it felt like something inside was touching back. He lifted it slowly, wood creaking, wet hinges groaning, like a breath escaping after years of holding still. Inside was nothing. No body, no bones, just the velvet lining torn in places. And claw marks, for long slashes, dug into the wood, like fingernails or something sharper. Elijah didn't move. He just stared. And then he exhaled. In the fog that left his mouth, words appeared. "You shouldn't have come." He blinked, and when he